down south side. I got 2 tosses from Coonia Beach, which is 50 k's, and then of course Tassie got cancelled, so that was a waste of time. And then I thought, oh, I better still do something because we're getting into the longer races. So I gave them 6 20k tosses from Ringwood. And that's the entire tossing they got for the whole year, apart from the early tossing before racing. And my whole training method, we're talking training, is geared around pigeons flying the roof. From the day that mine start flying, once they're weaned, and I mean they're all weaned, the whole 300, they get separated. My hens go one side and the cocks go the other, and from that day on they fly an hour every day, 6 days a week, not basketing day. Basketing day nothing goes out, but they fly the roof an hour every day. Hens go out at daybreak. If they land after half an hour, I chase them up. Not if the falcons are getting in them, of course, but if they just get lazy, I chase them up. I shut the doors, and they seem to learn that they have to fly that hour. And you can almost set your watch, because it takes me exactly an hour to scrape 800 perches. It takes me an hour to scrape the 800 perches, to put the fresh sand down every day. I open the doors and the pigeons are ready to land. It's almost to the hour, and I do that religiously from about the 1st of April. And when we get to 600 mile, like the last week, they still fly the hour because that's all they know. And the cocks do the same, but at night. That's it.
Can I just say this? I don't want to think that people to think that I just take birds out the loft and send them to a race. I didn't really mean that. And I give them a couple of little short tosses, which is just mainly to put them in the basket and to fly home. And on occasions, during the season, you have to toss your birds that are sitting there doing nothing. But basically, I think getting up the road every day, I haven't done it for years. Sorry.
Thank you, gentlemen. There's some interesting thoughts there. For whatever it's worth, my view on training was, I was asked probably 10 or 12 years ago when I was doing a talk, I think in Sydney, I was asked about training, and I really questioned myself, why do I train pigeons? What do I want from my pigeons? And I just looked at a football team or a soccer team or swimmers. You train basically for 2 reasons. Number 1 is physical fitness, and number 2 is your skill sets. And I identified the skill sets that I wanted refined in my pigeons. Number 1, you want your pigeons to leave the race point, toss point, straight away. Not to hang around, you want them to get away straight away. Number 2, you want them to fly in a straight line as fast as they possibly can, which comes into motivation, right? That's a separate story. And number 3, you want them out of the sky onto that scanning pad as quickly as possible. So that's the way I used to view training my pigeons. Physical fitness, and we've touched on that. Sometimes you can overdo it and you can wear the pigeons out. But remember, every time you take your pigeons out, you've also got to be mindful of those skill sets you're trying to drum into your pigeons, because it does become a conditioned reflex. And if a pigeon picks up a bad habit or something wrong early in its life, it'll tend to keep it for the rest of its racing life. So I was like John Van Beers. I never ever trained with anyone else. I always trained my pigeons on their own, because I wanted them from leave to leave point A and get to point B, which was my home loft, in a straight line. I didn't want them to be gregarious. They're only gregarious for wanting to be company with others of their same loft. I wanted unsociable pigeons, if I could put it that way. So some interesting thoughts there. Thanks very much, fellas. And what I'd like to talk about now, or quiz you out now, the training thing's one aspect, and we try to get to a point where you get a pigeon in form, or if you're lucky enough, you get a pigeon in super form. And my view on form and super form is, when you hit super form, the pigeon believes in itself so much it becomes also a mental attitude rather than physical. What do you look for in a pigeon in super form? Firstly, you, John.
a hard one. I don't think the whole lot's in super form, but they're not. I usually a pigeon will tell, often a pigeon will tell, what John said before and Dave, that the pigeon tells you itself if you're observing the pigeon. And again, some people have probably got the expertise to observe an animal and actually see what it's displaying. Other people probably can't, never will. I'm fortunate I have my daughter and her partner Cam, they're in my loft every day for 8 to 10 hours. So my birds are never released out of my loft because of the falcons and the goshawks. They're never sent out of my loft unless one of those two are sitting on the front of the loft. The reason being that if the falcons or the goshawk come, they've got two big heavy bits of timber, 50 by 50 timbers, red gum, and they just bang them together. I'd like to shoot them, but unfortunately the next door neighbour doesn't appreciate my guns. So, and that seems to scare them enough to deter them. So I don't get the opportunity, sometimes when you're in a partnership, for those who've been in partnerships, you take a step back and you look at a certain aspect of the portfolio of your loft, and others do the others. So in regard to superform, it's my daughter and Cam that actually observe the birds, and they're the ones who are observing them 8-10 hours a day, and they're the ones who will tell me that a certain bird needs to go. And I remember Leanne saying, we were picking our team out, Leanne said, I want that bird to go. Anyway, won the Fed, so obviously she saw something that Cam and I never saw that week. So I think to be able to see superform, I think it comes down to observation, and a lot of people probably haven't got the time, restraints, family, some people actually work, they'd not be able to be there all the time looking at those things. And what Greg said, he's right, it might only be one or two little displays in the whole day that bird shows, and if you're not there to observe it, then you possibly miss it, so therefore you don't realise that bird is cherry ripe to go to that race. So that's all I can say. I mean, like I said, I leave a lot of that form up to my daughter because they're there all day. That's what they're there for. That's why I pay them nothing. So I sit there all day watching.
You pretty well covered it there. The pigeons will tell you, as I say, then someone will say, what do you mean the pigeons will tell you they can't talk? Well, you'll see their eyes are normally shining bright and the pigeons are just happy. Or they're starting to pair up with another pigeon in there, in a corner. Now that'll bring on what people call their super form. Or all of a sudden, if your pigeons fly for an hour, they're doing 2 hours, 3 hours. They're just feeling good in themselves. And that's pretty well it. And then if you're flying well, you've got super form. That's the best way I can sum it up.
Well, I got no idea. The only thing that I would say, I can tell you when a pigeon is out of form. I can tell you when a pigeon is going off, because the pigeon loses its strength, as I call it. It just becomes softer in your hand. And that's when I've made a mistake and sent lots of pigeons to races and lost them, when they really should be spelled. And perhaps it's like the old days with the horses, where your horse would go along for a while and it'd put in a really poor run, and that horse was telling you it need to go out the paddock and have a spell. But as far as I'm concerned, if a pigeon feels nice and firm in the hand, it goes to the race, providing it's got feathers. And that's about my extent of it. I can tell you when a bird shouldn't go to a race, because I've lost lots of good ones sending them that shouldn't go, but I've got no idea about superform. I just believe that your good pigeons, if you look at them, they're the ones you're more likely to go. And if you clock one a month ago or a fortnight ago, or whenever you send it, you're more likely to get that one unless there's something wrong with it.
Superform, John?
Superform, I can answer in 2 words: super health. Super health is superform if you've got good pigeons. Without good health, I don't care how good the pigeons are. You can have Maccabee Diva, if it's not well, it won't win 100.